Dear guests, a warm welcome to the inaugural lecture on the occasion of the appointment of Anouk de Koning as Professor of Anthropology of Power, Politics and the State in the Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences of the University of Amsterdam. I now gladly give the floor to Professor de Koning to deliver the lecture.
Madam Rector Magnificus, Madam Dean, dear colleagues, friends, and family, wonderful that you've made it here, and welcome to those online. Let's start. I'm here for you, always nearby. Call me if you have a hard time. I might be able to help. We're in this together. I would really welcome your input. Tell me your dreams. So, who did you imagine just now? I bet you didn't think of the Dutch state. But this is how the Dutch state reaches out to us. It presents itself as a friendly, human state, one you can find nearby, in your neighborhood. It might come to your house to see what you need, and of course, what you can do yourself. It seeks to co-construct social policy and welfare services, putting power differences aside. Today, I'm going to talk to you about this new type of welfare state. This new welfare state has been long in the making, but 2015 was a decisive year. In that year, major welfare reforms refashioned the Dutch welfare state. These reforms were meant to decrease claims on welfare state resources by responsibilizing and empowering citizens. They envisioned a new, more proximate, more human and efficient state to be embodied by social neighborhood teams. I spent over a year following Amsterdam's version of these teams, the parent and child teams. Meanwhile, similar reforms were underway across Europe. Together with Aniek Volleberg and Milena Marchesi, working alongside me in Paris and Milan, we diagnosed these as an intimate state agenda. This intimate state has been the focus of my research over the past 10 years, first through my research with the parent and child teams, and more recently in 2 projects that examine the remaking of welfare landscapes in the Netherlands and across Europe. Today, I zoom in on that intimate welfare state. My lecture consists of 4 parts. In part 1, I discuss what anthropology can bring to the study of the welfare state. In part 2, I make this more concrete. I turn to the parent and child teams to sketch the dreams and convoluted realities of the intimate state. Part 3 sketches what happens when intimate state principles are taken up in social policy and traces the implications of this shift. I argue that intimate state principles generate what we might call a gluttonous state. And I end with a reflection on the potential for critical anthropology with the state. So, why an anthropology of the welfare state? The welfare state is a defining feature of life in Western Europe. It's hard to make sense of European lives without it. But surprisingly few anthropologists have made it the focus of their work. I'm convinced that anthropologists can provide a valuable perspective on the welfare state, a topic more commonly studied by other social sciences. But what might such an anthropology of the welfare state look like? Anthropology is very good at showing the state's puzzling, paradoxical nature. Writing in 1940, Radcliffe Brown pointed out that the state as an entity over and above society is a myth. There is no state that has a will, issue commands, no man with a big cigar. And we intuitively know that the state is an odd thing. Take the word overheid, the most common way to refer to the state in the Netherlands. The overheid is a pervasive, diffuse presence in people's lives. It's made up of public institutions working at different scales, national, provincial, municipal, and with a wide range of roles. Its boundaries are extremely unclear. Some institutions may be easily identified as state, a ministry, the police, courts. But what about the university? Am I a state actor? Are schools state? Is public transport? Despite its multiplicity and blurry boundaries, we casually invoke the state as an interlocutor, an entity that should act, care, and whom we can call to account and curse out if we need to. The welfare state is even more fuzzy. It's an abstract term that encompasses the state's social and welfare tasks. Many of these tasks are carried out by non-state organizations with public means. Think of social work organizations or housing corporations. The state is thus no unified bounded entity. It does not act, want, or have hidden schemes. Other social sciences may want to ignore this paradoxical nature and simplify the state into something more manageable. But for anthropologists, these paradoxes are at the heart of what the state is. The parent and child teams are a good example of this paradoxical nature. To me, the teams make up the core of the intimate welfare state. They are key players of Amsterdam's youth system. But teams professionals hardly saw themselves as state actors. And formally they were not state, since they were employed by a foundation that works on a public commission. Their ambivalent stateness impacts how they present themselves, how they operate, and how parents encounter them. So, how to study such a pervasive yet slippery phenomenon as the welfare state? I approach the welfare state through its institutions, each with their own remit, logics, commitments. This means that there is no privileged vantage point from which to capture the welfare state. Each institution provides us with a rich but situated picture. Studying these institutions requires a long-term ethnographic research. My own research with the parent and child team showed me the complex and unruly nature of institutional life. This was certainly no bleak or lifeless bureaucracy. This welfare state was very much alive. I found that the teams were animated by fantasies of this friendly, proximate state. They were driven by professional commitments to do good and a desire for friendly, horizontal helping relations. But they were also haunted by the lingering ghosts of an old welfare state and its paternalistic professionals. So let's take a closer look at that intimate state. We are here for you, always nearby, the bold letters on the parent and child team's website read. Since 2015, Amsterdam's parent and child teams have served as an entry point for questions about parenting and growing up. They also refer families to more specialized services, making them the linchpin of the youth welfare system. These publicly funded teams were designed to embody an intimate welfare state, always here for you, always nearby, that works closely with citizens to provide the support they need. Each family gets its own friendly, familiar face, a youth or parenting professional who will simply do what is needed. And this is a quote. This intimate state is one side of a dual configuration of the welfare state that revolves around tropes of activation, no more long-term welfare dependency, and responsibilization, making it your duty to care for yourself and those around you. In the domain of benefits, activation and responsibilization give rise to strict conditional welfare regimes with sanctions and compulsory volunteering. In contrast, in the social domain, that of social and welfare services, activation and responsibilization take the form of the intimate state. This intimate state is located nearby in the neighborhood, where it seeks to become part of the local social fabric, collaborating with other welfare providers and social initiatives to provide integrated welfare. It is meant to encourage people to care for themselves and for others. At its core, it's about horizontal collaboration and people's own strengths. Neighborhood teams across the Netherlands were designed to prototype this new welfare state, one that is more human, community-centered, as well as cost-effective and efficient. A win-win-win. At an introduction meeting for new members, the director of the parent and child teams laid out the program. A lot of people think we are small departments of youth protection, she said. In certain neighborhoods, there's a lot of fear of youth protection. We want to give people a different impression. We know who you are, and we'll solve the problem. We do, of course, keep an eye on child safety, but we stand alongside parent and child. As the director's words indicate, the teams were envisioned in opposition to an old welfare state. This old welfare state was imagined as an overly bureaucratic organization with pervasive fragmentation and overbearing paternalist professionals who foster dependence and inactivity. A municipal paper from 2013 argued that a radical change in mentality was needed to give people back control. It was up to the team's professionals to make this happen. They were expected to help families find solutions to their problems in their own environment, using their professional experience to come up with inventive solutions. The vision of a welcoming service for families in need of assistance aligned closely with professionals' personal commitment to fostering friendly, collaborative helping relations. This is captured in the mantra of standing alongside parents, naast ouders staan. Professionals should not be positioned as authoritative figures above parents. They were partners working alongside parents to find solutions. This was the opposite of the overbearing professional of the past, those who went over the heads of parents, acting behind their backs and dismissing parents' perspectives and agency. But the fantasy of a friendly, intimate state proved less clear-cut in practice. The tension between the old and the new welfare state remained. Even though the teams prided themselves on working with parents and children, at their request, they also remained responsible for monitoring the health, well-being and safety of all children in Amsterdam, as they had been in the old system. These tasks introduced interventionist logics that sat uncomfortably with the desire to stand alongside parents. This became clear when I presented my initial findings to a gathering of parent and child team professionals. Around 40 professionals trickled into the conference room in the city district office, many of the same people who had generously welcomed me into their work lives. During my presentation, I used the phrase working with, for, and against parents to describe the complexity of the team's helping relationships. Professionals want to work with parents, I explained, but they also carry the responsibility for children's well-being. And sometimes that responsibility means adopting a more forceful approach, one that might even feel like working against parents. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. We never work against parents, somebody said. Others quickly backed her up. The very idea that they might work against parents clearly struck a nerve. I was genuinely baffled. Why did they feel so passionately about this? As you may know, the reputation of welfare services in the Netherlands is quite ambiguous. Almost every parent has ambivalent stories to tell about the consultatiebureau, the youth health services that have been integrated into the parent and child teams. And teams professionals themselves often discuss the delicate balance of working with parents while also keeping an eye on child safety. So why then did my observations strike such a raw nerve? I've been thinking a lot about this moment. I've come to see these reactions as part of what I call an institutional psychic life. Institutional fantasies of a warm welfare state, a service there to help you, circulate in the organization. They connect policy visions with professionals' ethical commitments and with what Rassan Haaj calls fantasies of the self, stories we tell ourselves that makes our lives worth living. Such imaginaries of a warm, caring state and of professionals as a sympathetic helping hand relied on various forms of denial. Just think back of the reactions to my observation concerning the complex role of professionals. The fantasy of a friendly, helpful service, so central to professionals' identity, made it difficult to openly confront the authority embedded in their work. The lingering specter of the paternalistic professional rendered power almost unspeakable, casting it as something tainted, to be downplayed or denied. But these more forceful agendas and dimensions did not go away. Instead, they existed as public secrets, woven into the common sense of institutional life. As a result, professionals enacted an intimate state with a smiling face and extended hand that forgets the monitoring and interventions that are equally part of its mandate. So what happens when this policy vision moves out of institutions? How does it reshape social policy and welfare landscapes? These questions are central to my current projects. in which we study how intimate state agendas manifest in social policy and welfare programs across Europe. In recent years, intimate state principles have become the golden standard of Dutch social policy. After decades of new public management with its audit cultures and bureaucratic fragmentation, these principles hold the promise of a renewed, active role for the state, one that does not return us to the classical welfare model. Across the social domain, policymakers have embraced an integrated, collaborative, and area-based approach. Social policy should be organized locally, so the mantra goes, and work in an integrated fashion through one familiar face and through collaborative relations. Policy should start from resident strength and initiatives. The principle is clear. Rather than focus on providing services, the mission is to help people take care of themselves and each other. This means that increasingly, welfare publics are drawn into the provision of welfare services, a shift from social citizenship to what Andrea Mühlebach describes as ethical citizenship. These policies invite and urge a wide array of new actors, from social entrepreneurs to community organizers, residents, volunteers, to take part in welfare governance and provision. Let me illustrate this by zooming in on two types of programs that we study. Initiatives that seek to stimulate self-reliance and care in communities, and collaborative urban social policy. Our prototyping welfare team studies welfare initiatives that provide food aid, run community spaces, and organize volunteer help. More NGO and social initiative than formal welfare organization, these projects are part of expanding circles of welfare governance. Embedding the welfare state in the social fabric of neighborhoods and working with local social initiatives is expected to facilitate self-reliance and care in communities and alleviate claims on public services. Here, the state is imagined as a partner and facilitator rather than provider of services. By facilitating and incorporating local welfare initiatives, intimate state agendas generate hybrid landscapes made up of a patchwork of more and less formal welfare organizations, staffed by professionals and volunteers, many volunteers. It's not too far-fetched to say that the volunteer is a key figure of the intimate state. We encountered volunteers in many forms, seasoned ones with long careers in associational life, as well as people who are made to volunteer as a condition of their welfare benefits. For some, volunteering was a way to find meaning in a life at the margins of the labor market, while for others, volunteering provided access to crucial contacts, small business opportunities, or even bare necessities. In the intimate states philosophy, you can never be merely a recipient of services. You become a co-producer. Activating co-produced welfare spaces can provide a sense of belonging and community, as Vinicia Sananes found in a neighborhood workspace in Amsterdam Southeast. Here, people from different walks of life found conviviality and purpose. But the space depended on what Sananes calls cheerleaders of the welfare state, who unfalteringly present a positive narrative of potential and possibility. Unemployment, poverty must remain below the surface. This space offers respite, but no solutions. Similarly, Tessa Bonduel documents how poor volunteers working at a food hub in London found a sense of belonging in their daily volunteering work, but their personal need for the food products they helped distribute created tensions and suspicions, complicating the warm sense of family they so cherished. Moreover, such intimacies produced through large amount of free or badly paid labor that is made invisible through assumptions of natural, warm neighborliness. And creating proximity, especially with the poor, the destitute, those at the margins, is not always warm and comfortable. Marta Kapazoglu found that in Thessaloniki, the work of creating closeness may be delegated to people on insecure, temporary contracts, who are not much better off than those they are tasked to help. To them, proximity felt deeply troubling, an unwelcome reminder of their own precarity. Intimate welfare thus raises questions beyond the warm effects of its cheerleaders. Can those in need be asked to spend much of their time producing welfare services for themselves and others? And what happens to the notion of social rights when one must rely on non-state shadows of the welfare state? We also encounter the intimate state in urban policy. Policymakers in the Netherlands have enthusiastically embraced intimate state principles as a solution to tenacious urban problems. All such policies to be made with residents, with the neighborhood, de wijk. The neighborhood figures as a cure-all. It is imagined as the space where the gap between the state and citizens can be bridged, where policy can be done in an integrated manner, can be made more democratic and, of course, more efficient. Collaborative relations are at the core of these new urban policies. But establishing collaborations requires effort, especially in the poorer, more ethnically mixed neighborhoods that are often the focus of these policies. Such trust and collaboration can only be achieved when policy officials engage in what we are told human relationships, where they meet residents not as institutional representatives but as fellow human beings. This requires a new type of policy officer, an urban manager told us, one who's there in the evenings and weekends, who picks up the phone when residents call. Much like parent and child team professionals, these policy officials must become the trusted face of complex and often unwieldy municipal bureaucracies. These same officials must decide with whom to work, who can become a neighborhood representative. Some residents volunteer to take up that position. They hope to influence policy and gain access to resources. Policy officers may also create networks of key persons that can act as their counterpart in the neighborhood. Either way, questions about representativity keep coming up. Do these people really represent the neighborhood? Are their voices and wishes those of most residents? Or are they only there for people like them? And whom to choose if there are several contenders for the role of community or neighborhood representative? What about the interests of those not at the policy table? Policy officials must manage these questions, deciding how to enact the intimate state's democratic promise, how to assess the claims of residents sitting at the policy table, and how to weigh them against the City Council's formal democratic mandate. Once such collaborations gain momentum, new questions arise. How to build horizontal, collaborative working relations with residents who don't have an institutional position, are unpaid, and may lack bureaucratic skills and access. Even if one were to create paid positions, for whom and how much does one pay? Frontline policy officers may become micromanagers of neighborhood life. And this role is not without peril. In her study of Marseille's Politique de la Ville, Alice Daquin observed how small funds for local associations in a poor housing project damage social relations, creating competition for scarce resources among neighborhood mothers. It is clear that this collaborative urban policy changes what it means to be a policy officer. They are the familiar face of a large bureaucracy, connecting and mediating between residents' logics and policy processes and bureaucratic routines, a far from easy task. They must now also act as social workers and community organizers. Janne Hedrik founded a team that develops collaborative policies in Amsterdam North, spends much of its time brokering between municipality and residents and mediating tensions between them. These policy officers of the intimate state engage these challenges and contradictions not as institutional representatives, but as individuals who are personally committed to the process, to collaboration and its outcomes. The resulting tensions and often disappointments become very much their own. So, I've provided you with some glimpses of the intimate state in welfare and social policy. Let me now draw out more explicitly how intimate state programs transform social policy and welfare landscapes. I discuss three main points: the gluttonous nature of the intimate state, the significance of invisible labor, and how new welfare figures come to embody the contradictions of the intimate state. Much like the parent and child teams, today's social policy and welfare landscapes are shaped by alluring fantasies of a collaborative, horizontal, and democratic welfare state, one that nearly vanishes into society, blending seamlessly into the fabric of caring communities. In his 2009 inaugural lecture, Willem Trommel spoke about greedy governance, referring to state actors who seek to instrumentalize private and civic loyalties for the public good. Civil society is actively manufactured to take on public tasks, he argued. The cases I've just discussed show a similar instrumentalization of local social life. Ostensibly, policies that seek to shift welfare responsibilities from formal state and welfare institutions to individuals and society would lead to a diminished state presence and responsibilities. In practice, intimate state programs stimulate, co-opt, and consume the dreams, aspirations, initiatives, and networks of increasing numbers of people. They allow the state to expand into the social networks of community figures and into the lives of people on welfare. Policy officers may find themselves conductors of neighborhood life. The intimate state thus generates hybrid zones made up of the state, welfare institutions, social initiatives, community and neighborhood life, or a complex mix of them all. These seemingly peripheral zones become the core of welfare governance, loaded with high expectations and serious responsibilities. This intimate state turns out to be a gluttonous state then, that works through incorporating people, networks, and initiatives in expanding circles of welfare governance. This intimate state relies heavily on intensive labor of a host of people drawn into welfare governance. Despite its cheerful, optimistic take on collaborative policy, caring communities, the intimate state proves deeply taxing to those who have to realize it. Residents, community organizers, and volunteers are given much space and funding opportunities. But this comes with greater responsibilities and increasingly serious tasks. They volunteer countless hours to deliver services, build community, and represent their neighbors. They're asked to act professionally and find that their volunteering has become indispensable. Intimate state policies routinely disregard this crucial free labor, wishfully naturalizing social networks and activities as an inherent part of neighborhood life. We've seen the commitment, energy, and joy with which people respond to calls and openings in social policy, but we've also documented the toll it takes. We've seen people give up, disillusioned, burned out after years of effort that never quite amount to anything enduring or transformative enough. In this sense, too, the intimate state is gluttonous, as it consumes vast amounts of personal dreams and aspirations, free labor, and social relations. As you might have surmised, this intimate state is full of paradoxes and contradictions. I already mentioned some. New welfare figures are asked to invest their time, personal connections, social capital for free or on the cheap, despite their precarious economic situation. Power differences haunt supposedly horizontal collaborations in which some are paid and trained institutional actors, and others are there exactly because they're not. And the wish to work with residents often fails to translate in procedures that allow such collaborations to flourish. Instead, we see them strand in inflexible policy demands and procedures. The intimate state's new welfare figures, the residents, volunteers, community organizers, frontline professionals, and policy officers, often come to quite literally embody these contradictions. A telling example are the experts by experience that Charlotte van der Veen studies. Experiential expertise is increasingly sought out to break down barriers and hierarchies in welfare and social policy, enabling a better and more democratic connection between what is glossed as the life and system world. These experts by experience must perform professionally in policy worlds, but should also remain representatives of their marginalized position. Other new welfare figures face similar conundrums. They have to be professional enough to act as reliable counterparts, but should remain normal enough to represent ordinary people. Such tensions are often also racialized ones. Intimate state policies are framed in generic terms of residence and neighborhoods, but in fact, they often focus on poor neighborhoods with many people of color. They are home to communities seen as insufficiently integrated or troublesome. Neighborhoods where trust in governance actors and institutions is felt to be most frail. This racialized dimension is rarely made explicit. Instead, we read about neighborhoods that require attention or populations that are hard to reach. New welfare figures are often recruited from such racialized communities, hailed to mend relations and establish closeness. They act as representatives of society's most precarious and suspect members, a bridge to those considered risky and at risk. But their presence is shadowed by the stigmas associated with these groups. Racialized inequalities thus haunt collaborative urban policy. Lieke Wissink and Yannick Drijfhout document how these new governance actors, representatives of the hard-to-reach, find themselves navigated white middle-class policy landscapes on white middle-class institutional terms. They see how pervasive racialized inequalities lead to simmering tensions until they explode, as happened with the master plan in Amsterdam Southeast. To sum up, I've discussed the alluring vision of a more proximate, human and democratic state. This intimate state is also tricky, exacting, volatile. It draws increasing numbers and spaces into its remit, and it may produce social inequalities under the guise of empowerment and democratization. I hope to have given you a glimpse of what an anthropology of the welfare state has to offer. But one may ask, offer to whom? Anthropology has a long history of siding with the poor, the marginalized. As a result, much of anthropology's focus has been on the oppressive and disciplining nature of the state. Stef Janssen called this an anthropology against the state. Of course, states do enact violence and repression, especially against marginalized populations. But a singular focus on its violent character does not do justice to the state's role in providing the greeting of our everyday lives. It also does not speak to the promises of social citizenship that the welfare state embodies. And it makes it hard to acknowledge state actors' commitment to the public good. In the past decade, anthropologists have started paying increasing attention to people's investments in and hope for the state. They document the logics, ethical and effective investments that animate states at work. My work is part of that move, explicitly positioned to reflexively and critically engage with the state through the study of everyday welfare state practices. Instead of an anthropology against the state, I'm advocating for a critical anthropology with the state. The goal of such an anthropology is not to unmask hidden disciplinary agendas, but to engage in a critical dialogue. In our projects, we position ourselves alongside frontline workers, the policy officers, social professionals, and community organizers who struggle to make good on promises of a more caring welfare state, a more democratic social policy. They often do so with limited means in unwieldy policy landscapes and in a political climate that is increasingly out of sync with their efforts. A critical anthropology with the state means excavating the unsaid, the lingering contradictions and dead ends, drawing out and staying with the trouble, without, however, dismissing the commitments and dreams that animate state institutions. Many of the people in our research valued such critical dialogues, including when we pointed to more ambivalent, tricky, even violent outcomes of their work. Such an anthropology with the state provides food for critical thought and action, an opening to imagine and work toward a better state. Now that I've set out my research agenda, I can get to something I've been looking forward to, the thank yous. Almost 20 years ago, I stood here to defend my dissertation on emerging social divides in Cairo. It's a great honor and pleasure to stand here again after an academic journey that has taken me across the globe to inaugurate my chair in Power, Politics and the State in Anthropology at the University of Amsterdam. My heartfelt thanks to the Executive Board of the University of Amsterdam and our Dean for their confidence in me. My favorite aspect of academia are the interesting, wonderful, and quirky companions you meet along the way. To everyone who's been part of this journey, you've greatly enriched my life. My first taste of academic life was when Peter Geschiere and Bonotode van Velzen opened their PhD course to undergraduates and showed us what academic conviviality and generosity look like. He may not remember. Working with Rukmini Suraj Devi Prasad under the supervision of Alex and Stiprian on my master's research in Suriname taught me the joys of collaborative research. When I went on to do a PhD here at the University of Amsterdam, I became part of a wonderful cohort. Thank you, Eileen, Yatoon, Courtney, Pia, Shifra, Miriam, Ines, Martijn, Irfan, and Francio for sharing that intellectual journey and for years of solidarity and fun. Fazira Zamindar, I cherish our friendship across continents. It's moving to have you here today. Mustafa, Dina, Mohammed, and Noha, thank you for welcoming me into your lives and making Cairo my second home. Alfa Shukran, Ya Habaib, Nawaru Hayati. As an assistant professor at Radboud University, I saw what a commitment to students and teaching looked like. Thank you, Toon van Mel, for taking me on, and Martijn Koster for being such a great colleague and friend. At the Radboud, I recruited my first team to study the making of post-colonial Europe. Aniek, Milena, Wiebe, Lucretia, and Sukaina, thank you for sharing this adventure and for all the learning and thinking we did and still do together. I'm deeply indebted to the parent and child team professionals who taught me so much about the welfare state. I was lucky to find in Wayne Modest a wonderful companion for thinking about the complicated realities of race in our lives. My move to Leiden introduced me to an amazing group of colleagues. The department offered a warm and inspiring space thanks to Annemarie Samuels, Jasmijn Rana, Andrew Littlejohn, Tessa Minter, John Boy, Bart Barendrecht, and Sabine Luning, among others. I miss you all. Working with Femke Kouling-Frex and Maartje van der Woude, we dreamed big, developing our unwieldy but inspiring Crafting Resilience project. Combined with my Vichy grant, I was able to recruit the amazing Welfare Futures team you've heard so much about today. Charlotte, Yannick, Janne, Felicia, Marta, Tessa, Alice, and Lieke. What an honor and what fun to be working together. Sarah, Iris, and Iris, thank you for keeping us afloat and on track with such verve and joy. Over the past year, I've become part of the sprawling, anarchistic, creative, and buzzing anthropology department at the UvA, with many old and new colleagues and friends. I still feel honored and slightly dazed by my new position. Thank you, Tina Harris, Yatoon Sastramidjaya, Jorge Núñez, Natasha Lemos-Dekker, Nafis Hassan, Rachel Spronk, and Christina Krause, and all the others for your wonderful collegiality and friendship. Hebe, my old friend, I'm looking forward to working together in these coming years. And a big thank you to Muriel Kiso, Christina Garofalo, and Janus Omen for making it all possible. I also want to take a moment to think of the people who have passed away last year. Maria Perquin, Jon Schreier, Arnold Gevers, and Sabine Luning. You're sorely missed. I'm the luckiest person to have such a loving family. My parents, Tom and Remaking de Koning, have always been there for me. I may be a professor now, but to them I will always be their somewhat quirky daughter. My brothers, Martijn and David, now joined by Hannah, always make me feel I'm home. As for chosen family, Rivke, Jaf, and Nadine Moyer, you're so much more than colleagues and friends. I would have not done anything or any of this without you. Together, academia is never too daunting or too lonely. And Ivo, your steady love and support and humor have kept me afloat all those years. Noor, the light of my eyes, you've brought me such joy and continue to teach me about what it is to grow up in this crazy world of ours. Ik heb gezegd.